I stood at the altar for the second time in 3 years. But this time, the woman in white wasn't the one I'd built a life with. She wasn't the one I'd loved through every silence, every doubt, every cold night when she turned away from me. No, this time, it was her best friend. And somewhere in the back of that small, sunlit chapel, hidden behind a veil of her own shame, my ex-wife sat trembling. I didn't invite her. She came anyway. It started with a rumor. One she planted like a seed in soil she thought would never bloom into anything that could hurt her. He's gay, she told them. Her friends. Her co-workers. Her family. She said it with a laugh, casual and cutting, as if my masculinity, my entire identity, was something she could erase with a whisper. And they believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was charming. She was loved. And I? I was quiet. I didn't defend myself loudly. I didn't fight back. I just left. But what she didn't know, what she never saw coming, was that someone else had been watching. Someone who knew the truth. Someone who had loved me in silence while my wife spread lies in public. Her name was Clare. And when I finally walked away from that broken marriage, it was Clare who caught me. Not out of pity. Not out of revenge. Out of love. And now, my ex-wife would have to watch me marry her. It started at a dinner party I wasn't invited to. That should have been my first clue. But when you love someone, really love them, you make excuses. You tell yourself they forgot. That it was a small gathering. That maybe you misunderstood the date or the time or the entire concept of being wanted. I did that for months. Maybe longer. I can't pinpoint exactly when the coldness started. It crept in like winter fog, slow and deliberate, until one day I woke up shivering and realized I'd been freezing for a long time. Natalie had been distant. Not in the way couples drift when life gets busy, this was different. Surgical. Intentional. Like she was rehearsing for an exit she hadn't announced yet. She'd come home late, her laughter still echoing in her throat from wherever she'd been, from whoever she'd been with. She'd scroll through her phone at dinner, smiling at things I wasn't part of, liking photos I'd never see. And when I asked her what was wrong, she'd look at me like I was imagining ghosts in an empty house. Nothing's wrong, she'd say, her voice flat. You're too sensitive. So I stopped asking. I stopped reaching. I learned to make myself smaller in my own home. I thought maybe it was work. Stress from a promotion she wanted. The weight of responsibilities I couldn't see or understand. I didn't think it was me. Not until the night Claire knocked on my door and shattered everything I thought I knew. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday. One of those nights where the world feels too quiet, like it's holding its breath before something terrible happens. I opened the door, and there she was, Natalie's best friend since college, standing in my hallway with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands that clutched her car keys like a lifeline. She didn't say hello. She didn't apologize for the hour or the intrusion. She just looked at me with this expression, part pity, part anger, part something I couldn't name, and said, "You need to know what she's been saying about you." My stomach dropped to my feet. What do you mean? Claire stepped inside without waiting for permission. She didn't sit. She just stood there in my living room, wringing her hands like she was trying to squeeze courage out of her own skin. The lamp in the corner cast shadows across her face, making her look older, sadder, like she'd aged years in the time it took to drive to my house. "She's been telling people you're gay," Claire said, and her voice cracked on the last word. The sentence didn't land at first. It hovered in the air between us like a bird that didn't know how to fall, too absurd to be real, too specific to be a mistake. What? She's been saying it for weeks. Maybe months. At parties. At work. To our mutual friends. To people who barely know you. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She told them your marriage is a cover. That you begged her to stay married so you wouldn't have to come out. That you're too afraid to live your truth, so she's living a lie for you. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The walls seemed to breathe. Everything I thought was solid suddenly felt like it was made of paper. "That's not true," I whispered. "I know." Claire's voice broke. "God, I know it's not true. But she's saying it anyway. And people are believing her." I sank onto the couch, my legs giving out beneath me. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart until it couldn't beat properly anymore. Not because being called gay was shameful, it isn't, but because she'd weaponized the parts of me I'd given her in trust. My quietness. My gentleness. The fact that I liked poetry and old films and long walks instead of sports bars and loud parties. The fact that I wasn't loud or aggressive or traditionally masculine in the way she'd started to want. She'd taken my love, my loyalty, my vulnerability, and turned it into a punchline. A story she could tell to make herself interesting. To make herself the victim in a marriage where I'd done nothing but love her. Why would she do that? My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else, someone who still believed the world made sense. Claire looked at me like I was a child asking why the sky was falling. Her expression was equal parts heartbreak and frustration, like she'd been waiting for me to wake up for a long time. Because you weren't enough of a trophy for her anymore, she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. She wanted someone flashy, Claire continued, her voice thick with emotion. Someone who made her look good at parties. Someone who fit the image she had in her head of what a successful woman's husband should look like. And when you didn't? She trailed off, shaking her head. She rewrote the story. Made you the problem instead of admitting she was bored. That she'd made a mistake. That maybe she was never capable of loving someone who wasn't a reflection of herself. I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small. Too hot. Too full of truths I hadn't wanted to face. I thought about all the times she'd introduced me to her work friends with that tight, apologetic smile. The way she'd cut me off mid-sentence when I tried to tell a story at parties. The jokes she made about how I preferred museums to sports games, books to bars, quiet evenings at home to crowded clubs. I thought those were affectionate. Playful. The way couples tease each other. But they weren't. They were auditions. Tests. And I'd been failing every single one without even knowing I was being graded. I'm sorry, Claire whispered, and a tear finally escaped, sliding down her cheek. I should have told you sooner. But I didn't know how. And I didn't think she'd actually go this far. I thought maybe she'd stop. That she'd realize what she was doing. But she didn't. She just kept going. I looked at her, this woman who'd been Natalie's friend for over a decade, who'd been at our wedding, who'd helped us move into this house, and I realized she'd been carrying this weight for weeks. Maybe months. Watching me. Protecting me in the only way she knew how. Thank you, I said quietly. For telling me. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What are you going to do? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know yet. She left a few minutes later, and I sat there in the dark, staring at the walls of the home I'd built with a woman I didn't recognize anymore. The photos on the mantel, our wedding day, our honeymoon in Italy, last Christmas with her family, felt like artifacts from someone else's life. The furniture we'd picked out together at IKEA, laughing about which couch matched our aesthetic, felt like props in a play I'd never agreed to star in. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry. I just sat in the silence, replaying every moment. Every joke at my expense. Every time she'd pulled away when I tried to hold her hand in public. Every cold shoulder, every dismissive comment, every time she'd made me feel like I was too much or not enough or somehow fundamentally wrong. And I realized, this wasn't new. The lie wasn't the beginning. It was the ending of something that had been dying for a long time. Maybe since the beginning. Maybe since before we even said, I do. By the time the sun came up, painting the living room in shades of gold and pink that felt obscenely hopeful, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay married to someone who saw me as a problem to solve. Someone who'd rather destroy my reputation than admit she'd made a mistake. Someone who'd turned my love into a weapon against me. So I decided I wouldn't. I confronted her the next morning, before I could lose my nerve. The kitchen smelled like coffee and something floral, her expensive perfume, the one that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, still lingering in the air from wherever she'd been the night before. She was sitting at the table in her silk robe, scrolling through her phone with that same detached, untouchable expression she always wore now. Like nothing in the world could reach her. Like she existed on some higher plane where consequences didn't matter. She didn't look up when I walked in. Didn't acknowledge my presence at all. Why did you tell people I'm gay? My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of dangerous calm that comes when you've already grieved something and you're just waiting for the world to catch up to what you already know is dead. She paused. Her perfectly manicured thumb hovered over the screen for just a moment. Then she set the phone down slowly, deliberately, like she was buying time to decide which version of herself to perform for me. I didn't say you were gay, she said, her tone light and casual, like we were discussing whether we needed milk from the store. I just said I had my doubts. The air left my lungs. Doubts? Yeah. She picked up her coffee mug, the one I'd bought her for our first anniversary, with her initials in gold leaf, and took a slow sip. Then she set it down with a soft clink. You're not exactly the most masculine guy, you know? People ask questions. They notice things. I was just being honest when they asked. I stared at her. Really stared at her. This woman I'd loved for 5 years. This woman I'd proposed to on a beach at sunset because she said she'd always dreamed of that. This woman I'd built a life with, compromise by compromise, dream by dream. This woman who used to laugh at my jokes and fall asleep on my shoulder during movies and tell me I made her feel safe. She was looking at me like I was a problem she'd finally figured out how to solve. Like she'd been waiting for this moment, this confrontation, and she'd already decided exactly how it would go. You humiliated me, I said, and my voice shook despite my best efforts to keep it steady. I didn't humiliate you, she said, and there wasn't even a trace of guilt in her voice. I just told the truth as I saw it. As other people saw it too, honestly. You can't blame me for what everyone was already thinking. It's not the truth. She shrugged, actually shrugged, like my entire identity, my entire sense of self, was just a minor disagreement about the weather. Then prove it. The words hung between us like a challenge. A dare. And that's when I saw it clearly for the first time, the contempt. It was always there, I realized. Lurking beneath every smile, every kiss, every "I love you" that had sounded increasingly hollow over the years. I'd just been too busy loving her to notice I was living with someone who'd stopped seeing me as human. She didn't love me. She probably never really had. She didn't even respect me. I was a placeholder. A safe option. Someone who made her look stable and put together while she figured out what she really wanted from life. Someone whose quietness made her look more vibrant by comparison. And now that she was bored, now that I wasn't shiny enough, loud enough, impressive enough to match whatever image she'd constructed of her perfect life, she was rewriting our entire history to make herself the victim. I want a divorce, I said. For the first time that morning, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or maybe just irritation that I'd deviated from whatever script she'd written in her head. Then she laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was sharp and brittle and mocking. The kind of sound that cuts through you and leaves wounds you can't see but will feel for years. Fine, she said, leaning back in her chair like a queen on a throne. But don't expect anyone to believe your side of the story. I've been laying the groundwork for months. Everyone already knows what you are. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Not because I wanted to hit her, I'd never, could never, but because I needed something to hold on to. Some proof that I was still real, still here, still capable of feeling something other than this crushing betrayal. You really think that little of me? I asked. I think, she said, her eyes cold and glittering like ice, that you've been playing the victim for so long, you don't know how to be anything else. Poor, sensitive, misunderstood you. It must be so hard being so gentle in such a harsh world. Her voice dripped with sarcasm, and I realized she'd been practicing this. This cruelty wasn't spontaneous. She'd been rehearsing these lines, perfecting this performance, probably while lying next to me at night. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say to someone who'd turned love into warfare. I walked to the bedroom, my legs moving on autopilot. Grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. Started packing, clothes, toiletries, the photo of my parents I kept on the nightstand. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely zip the bag closed. She didn't follow me. She didn't ask where I was going or when I'd be back. She just sat in that kitchen, scrolling through her phone again, probably texting her friends about what a scene I was making, how dramatic I was being, how she'd always known I couldn't handle the truth. When I walked past her with my bag slung over my shoulder and my car keys in my hand, she didn't even look up. You'll regret this, she said to her phone screen. You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will want you. I stopped at the door. My hand on the knob. The morning light streaming through the window felt too bright, too hopeful for this moment. I turned back. Looked at her one last time. Tried to find even a trace of the woman I'd fallen in love with. But she was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed at all. No, Natalie, I said quietly. I won't. And I walked out. The morning air hit me like a baptism. Cold. Sharp. Real. I stood on the sidewalk outside the house we'd bought together, the house with the blue shutters she'd insisted on, the garden I'd planted, the mailbox we'd painted together on a Sunday afternoon that felt like it belonged to different people, and I felt the strangest thing. Nothing. No sadness. No anger. Just a quiet, hollow ache where something used to be. Like a tooth that had been pulled, leaving only the ghost of pain and a space that would eventually heal. I got in my car. Started the engine. And as I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not even once. Claire was there the day I moved out. Really moved out. Not just the emergency escape with one bag, but the systematic dismantling of a life I'd thought was permanent. I didn't ask her to come. I didn't even tell her I'd rented a truck and taken the day off work to pack up what was left of my things from the house that had stopped feeling like home months, maybe years, ago. But somehow, she knew. She showed up at noon with a stack of cardboard boxes that still smelled like the hardware store, a roll of packing tape, coffee from the place that knew how I took it, and that sad, understanding smile that told me she knew everything I couldn't say. "Hey," she said softly, standing on the porch with her arms full, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing old jeans and a sweatshirt that had paint stains on the sleeves. "Hey," I replied, and my voice cracked on that single syllable. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer platitudes or false comfort. She just stepped inside and started helping me pack. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. She'd always been like that, quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed things other people missed or ignored. The way you took your coffee. The books you mentioned once in passing and forgot about. The look on your face when you were pretending to be okay but really weren't. The exact moment when a smile became a mask. Natalie used to make fun of her for it, especially after a few drinks at parties. She'd say Claire was too soft, that she needed to toughen up if she wanted people to take her seriously in the real world, that all that empathy would get her nowhere in life. But I always liked that about Claire. She didn't need to be loud to matter. She didn't need to perform or prove anything. She just was. Present. Steady. Real in a way that felt increasingly rare. We packed in silence, moving through the rooms like ghosts revisiting a life that no longer belonged to me. Every object felt heavy with memory, weighed down by the history it carried. The couch we'd picked out together after weeks of searching, arguing about fabric and color. The lamp Natalie hated but I loved because it reminded me of my grandmother's house. The framed photo of us on our wedding day, both of us smiling like we believed in forever, like we thought love was enough. Claire didn't ask what happened. She didn't pry or push or try to get me to talk before I was ready. She just worked beside me, folding clothes with careful precision, wrapping dishes in newspaper, taping boxes shut with an efficiency that felt almost reverent, like she understood these were the artifacts of a life ending. By late afternoon, my entire existence fit into the back of a rented truck. Everything I owned, everything I'd thought mattered, everything I'd brought into a marriage that had turned into a lie, all of it reduced to boxes and garbage bags and furniture that would need to find a new home. "Where are you going to stay?" Claire asked as we loaded the last box into the truck. Her voice was gentle, careful, like she was afraid the question itself might break me. "A friend's place," I said, not meeting her eyes. "For now. Just until I figure things out." She hesitated. I saw something flicker across her face, doubt, maybe, or fear, or something deeper I couldn't name. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "You could stay with me," she said finally. "I have a guest room. It's small, but it's yours if you want it. For as long as you need." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was standing in the driveway, the late afternoon sun turning her hair into spun gold, her hands shoved deep into the pockets of her jacket like she was trying to make herself smaller, less threatening, like she was afraid I'd say no and she'd regret asking. There was something in her eyes, vulnerability, maybe, or hope, or both, that made my chest ache. And I realized something I should have seen years ago: she'd been seeing me this whole time. Not the version Natalie had invented, the questionable, not quite masculine enough, probably gay husband who was more burden than blessing. Not the rumor or the lie or the story Natalie had been telling to anyone who would listen. Just me. The actual person I was beneath all the noise. "I don't want to be a burden," I said, and I meant it. I'd been called that enough, implicitly, explicitly, in 1,000 small ways, that I couldn't bear the thought of being it again. You're not. Her voice was so soft, so certain, so full of something I'd stopped believing existed. You never were. Something in my chest cracked open. Not painfully. More like a door that had been locked for years suddenly remembering how to open. I stayed with Claire that night. And the night after that. And the night after that. And somewhere in those quiet evenings, cooking dinner together in her small kitchen, watching old movies on her worn couch, talking about nothing and everything while the city hummed outside her windows, I started to feel human again. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't ask me to explain or defend or justify myself. She didn't need the full story or demand I perform my pain for her validation. She just let me exist. Gave me space to breathe. To be silent when I needed silence and to talk when words finally came. And in return, I started to notice things about her I'd never let myself see before. The way she hummed while she cooked, completely unself-conscious, lost in the simple joy of creating something. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating on a book or a recipe or a thought. The way she laughed, really laughed, with her whole body, at the stupid jokes I made when I was trying to fill the silence with something other than my own sadness. The way she looked at me sometimes when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was something precious. Something worth keeping. One night, maybe 2 weeks after I'd moved in, we were sitting on her balcony. The city stretched out below us like scattered stars, and the air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. She handed me a cup of tea, and our fingers brushed. It was nothing. Barely a touch. But I felt it everywhere. Thank you, I said. For what? For this. For being here. I stopped, trying to find words adequate to the feeling. For seeing me. She looked at me, her eyes dark and unreadable in the dim light, reflecting the city glow. I've always seen you, she said quietly. And in that moment, I realized she had. All this time, while I was busy trying to be enough for someone who would never see me as anything but insufficient, Claire had been there. Watching. Waiting. Not because she wanted something from me. Not because she was keeping score or waiting for her moment. But because she already knew who I was. And she'd been waiting for me to know it too. That night, I didn't feel lost anymore. I felt found. It happened slowly, then all at once. The way important things usually do. Claire and I became inseparable. Not in the desperate, clinging way people latch onto lifeboats in a storm, but in the way two people fit together when they've been circling each other for years without realizing they were always supposed to collide. She made me laugh. Real laughter, the kind that comes from your stomach and leaves you breathless and aching in the best way. She listened when I talked, not just to respond with her own stories, but to actually understand. To remember. To care about the small details that most people let slip through the cracks. And she didn't try to fix me or change me or mold me into some idealized version she'd constructed in her head. She just let me exist. And in return, I started to see her differently. Not as Natalie's quiet friend who always sat in the corner at parties. Not as the woman who always volunteered to be the designated driver or help clean up while everyone else kept drinking. But as someone extraordinary in her own right. Someone who'd been hiding her light under a bushel not because it was dim, but because she'd learned that brightness made some people uncomfortable. We fell into a rhythm that felt ancient, like muscle memory from a life we'd lived before. Mornings, she'd make coffee while I scrambled eggs, and we'd eat breakfast on her tiny balcony, watching the city wake up. Evenings, we'd sit on her couch with a bottle of wine between us and talk about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, the things we were afraid to say out loud, the versions of ourselves we'd buried to make other people comfortable. And slowly, carefully, the walls I'd built around myself started to crumble. One night, about a month after I'd moved in, we were sitting in her living room. The TV was playing something neither of us was actually watching, some romantic comedy she'd put on more for background noise than entertainment. The bottle of wine between us was half empty, and the air felt thick with something unspoken, something that had been building for weeks. I used to be jealous of Natalie, Claire said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I turned to her, startled. Why? She looked down at her glass, swirling the wine like she was searching for courage in the deep red color. Her fingers trembled slightly, and I noticed she'd bitten her nails, something she only did when she was anxious. Because she had you, Claire said finally. My breath caught in my throat. I thought? She paused. Swallowed hard. I thought if she could make you happy, then maybe I wasn't as special as I wanted to be. Like maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Some deficit I couldn't see but everyone else could. That's why she got chosen and I didn't. Claire. But then I realized, she continued, her voice trembling but determined, she didn't make you happy. She just made you small. She took this incredible, gentle, thoughtful person and convinced him he was somehow less than. And I hated watching that. I set my glass down on the coffee table, my hands shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I hated watching you shrink yourself to fit into her idea of who you should be, she said. You stopped telling those stories that lit up your whole face. You stopped talking about the books you loved and the art that moved you and the quiet things that made you who you are. You stopped being you. You became this muted version, this shadow. And I wanted to say something. I wanted to grab you and shake you and tell you that you were perfect exactly as you were. But I didn't know how. And I didn't think you'd listen. I would have listened, I said quietly, meaning it with everything in me. Would you? She looked up at me, and her eyes were red, shining with unshed tears. Because it seemed like you loved her too much to see what she was doing to you. It seemed like you'd convinced yourself that if you just tried harder, loved better, made yourself smaller, she'd finally see you the way you deserved to be seen. The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold and trembling in mine. I don't feel small with you, I said, and my voice cracked on the words. I feel like I can be exactly who I am. No performance. No pretending. No trying to be louder or more masculine or more anything. Just me. Her breath hitched. You're not too soft, Claire, I continued, needing her to understand this, to believe it. You're not too quiet. You're not too sensitive or too empathetic or too anything. You're exactly enough. You're more than enough. You're. My voice broke. I didn't know how to finish that sentence. How to put into words what she'd become to me. I've loved you for so long, she whispered, and a tear finally escaped, sliding down her cheek. Since before you married her. Since the engagement party where you told me about your favorite poem and your eyes lit up like the whole world made sense. I didn't think you'd ever see me. Not really. Not the way I saw you. I see you now, I said. And then I kissed her. It wasn't desperate or rushed or frantic. It was soft. Careful. Tentative. Like we were both afraid we'd break if we moved too fast, if we pushed too hard. Her lips were warm and tasted like wine and salt from her tears. Her hand came up to cup my face, her palm cool against my flushed skin. And when she kissed me back, really kissed me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the naive, childish hope that everything would be easy. But the real, grounded hope that comes from recognizing you've found something rare. Something worth protecting. Something that sees you and chooses you anyway. We pulled apart slowly, our foreheads resting together, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. Is this okay? I whispered. It's more than okay, she whispered back. It's everything. That night, everything changed. Not because we decided it would. But because it already had been changing for weeks, maybe months, maybe years, and we'd finally stopped fighting it. Natalie found out about us 3 months later. I don't know how. Maybe mutual friends who saw us having dinner together and noticed we'd stopped sitting across from each other and started sitting side by side. Maybe she saw a photo Claire posted on Instagram, nothing obvious, just the two of us at a coffee shop, but with a caption that implied something more. Maybe she'd been watching us all along, monitoring social media, asking questions, waiting for proof that would validate whatever narrative she'd constructed. But she called. And when I saw her name flash across my phone screen, my stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button. Claire was in the kitchen making pasta, humming that song she always hummed, and I didn't want to bring Natalie's poison into this space we'd created. This small, safe world where I was allowed to be happy. But I answered. Because some part of me, the part that had loved her once, that had stood at an altar and promised forever, felt like I owed her that much. Are you fucking kidding me? Her voice was a scream, sharp and hysterical, and I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You're with her? I closed my eyes. Took a breath. Natalie. You said you weren't gay, she shouted, and I could hear her pacing, could picture her in whatever apartment she'd moved to after I left, probably throwing things, definitely crying those angry tears she'd always been so good at producing. You looked me in the fucking eye and told me I was lying, and now you're with my best friend? You moved on that fast? I moved on when you humiliated me, I said, keeping my voice calm and steady despite the rage boiling in my chest. Claire had nothing to do with that decision. She wasn't even part of the equation. You did this. Your lies. Your cruelty. This is on you. She was my best friend. Natalie's voice rose to a pitch that barely sounded human. We've known each other since college. And she just, swooped in the second you left? How long were you two? Nothing happened between us while we were married, I cut her off. Nothing. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't lie to you. I didn't spread rumors about you to everyone we knew. That was all you. She was my friend, she repeated, like the betrayal of friendship mattered more than the betrayal of our marriage vows. And you were my wife, I shot back, and something in my voice must have startled her because she went quiet. But that didn't stop you from telling everyone I was gay. That didn't stop you from humiliating me. From turning me into a joke. From rewriting our entire marriage to make yourself the victim. Silence. Heavy and thick and loaded with all the things we'd never said to each other when it mattered. Then, in a voice so small it almost broke me, so different from the screaming, I didn't think you'd actually leave. The admission hung between us like a confession. That's the problem, Natalie, I said quietly. You didn't think at all. You didn't think about how your lies would hurt me. You didn't think about the consequences. You just did whatever served you in the moment, whatever made you look interesting or sympathetic or like the victim of some tragic circumstance. You never thought I'd actually have enough self-respect to walk away. I hung up before she could respond. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free. Claire appeared in the doorway, wooden spoon in hand, concern written across her face. You okay? She asked softly. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I really am. But Natalie didn't let it go. Of course she didn't. Within days, the cryptic posts started appearing on social media. Vague but specific enough that anyone who knew us would understand exactly what she was talking about. Asterisk, it's amazing how the people closest to you can betray you without a second thought. Asterisk. Asterisk, when your husband steals your best friend, or did your best friend steal your husband? Either way, trash took itself out. Asterisk. Asterisk, some people will do anything for male validation. Even if it means destroying a friendship that lasted over a decade. Asterisk. She told people we'd been having an affair the whole time. That I'd left her for Claire. That Claire had been secretly in love with me for years and had systematically undermined our marriage. That I was exactly what she'd said all along, just using women as covers while I figured out what I really wanted. The messages came secondhand. Friends forwarding screenshots. Former coworkers asking if I was okay. My sister calling to ask what the hell was going on. But something different happened this time. People didn't believe her. Because Claire and I didn't hide. We didn't skulk or defend ourselves or issue carefully worded statements. We didn't play the game Natalie wanted us to play. We just lived. Visibly. Openly. Happily. We went to dinner at places we knew mutual friends frequented. We posted photos, nothing provocative, just us existing together. Hiking. Cooking. Reading on the couch with our feet tangled together. Normal couple things. Happy things. And that quiet authenticity was louder than any of Natalie's accusations. People started asking questions. They remembered the things Natalie had said about me before the divorce. The rumors she'd spread. And they started to realize, maybe she'd been the problem all along. One night, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. Someone who'd known both of us for years. Asterisk, just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have asked for your side of the story. She really did a number on you, didn't she? Glad you got out. You deserve to be happy. Asterisk. I showed it to Claire. She smiled, that soft, genuine smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. Told you, she said, squeezing my hand. The truth always wins in the end. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. I proposed to Claire on a Tuesday. Not because it was special or significant or marked some important anniversary. But because every day with her felt special, and I was tired of pretending that what we had needed more time or more certainty or more anything. We were in her apartment, the same one I'd stayed in when I had nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart. The same place that had stopped being her apartment and started being our home, though we'd never formally discussed it. My books had migrated to her shelves. My clothes hung in her closet. My toothbrush lived in the holder next to hers. She was washing dishes from dinner, humming that song she always hummed, something old and jazzy I could never quite place. She'd pulled her hair into a messy bun, and she was wearing an old NYU sweatshirt she'd had since college and jeans with paint stains on them from when we'd repainted the living room last month. No makeup. No pretense. No performance. Just Claire. I was sitting at the kitchen table, supposedly reviewing some documents for work, but really I was just watching her. The way she moved. The way she existed in the world without apology. The way she'd made space for me in her life so effortlessly, like I'd always been meant to fit there. And I realized, I didn't want to spend another day without her. Not another day without knowing that this was permanent. That she was mine and I was hers and we'd chosen each other deliberately, consciously, with full knowledge of what that meant. Marry me, I said. The dish she was holding slipped from her hands and fell back into the sink with a splash and a clatter. She froze, her back still to me, her shoulders suddenly tense. What? Marry me, I repeated, standing up and crossing the small kitchen to stand behind her. She turned around slowly, bubbles still clinging to her hands, water dripping onto the floor. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, and she looked terrified and hopeful all at once. Are you serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. You don't have a ring, she said, and I couldn't tell if she was looking for an excuse or just stating a fact. I know. I don't have some big romantic speech planned either. I don't have candles or rose petals or a photographer hiding in the bushes. I took her wet hands in mine. I just know that I love you. And I don't want to waste another second pretending this isn't exactly where I'm supposed to be. We've only been together for 6 months, she said, but her voice was wavering. I know. People will talk. They'll say you're rebounding. They'll say we moved too fast. Let them talk, I said simply. I spent years caring what people thought. Years making myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. I'm done with that. The only opinion that matters to me is yours. Her eyes filled with tears. This isn't about proving something to Natalie, I continued, needing her to understand this completely. This isn't about revenge or making a point or showing anyone anything. This is about you. And me. And the fact that you see me, really see me, and you love me anyway. I love you because I see you, she whispered, and the tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. Then marry me, I said again. Not someday. Not eventually. Soon. As soon as possible. Because I already know how this ends, Claire. It ends with us. It's always been going to end with us. She laughed through her tears, this beautiful, broken, joyful sound. You're crazy. Maybe, I admitted. But I'm also completely sure. She looked at me for a long moment, searching my face for doubt or hesitation. She wouldn't find any. Then she launched herself at me, wrapping her wet, soapy hands around my neck and pressing her forehead to mine. Yes, she breathed. Yes. 1,000 times yes. 1,000,000 times yes. And when I kissed her, it felt like the beginning of something I'd been searching for my entire life. Not someone who wanted me to be different. Not someone who saw me as a project or a problem or a temporary solution. But someone who loved me exactly as I was, quietly, completely, permanently. We didn't tell anyone at first. We just existed in that little bubble of happiness, planning something small and intimate. A ceremony at the courthouse, maybe, with just a few close friends. Or something tiny at a local park. Nothing big. Nothing performative. Just us, promising forever in front of the people who actually mattered. But word got out anyway. The way it always does in the age of social media and interconnected lives. Someone saw me looking at rings. Someone else overheard Claire on the phone with her sister. The rumors started spreading through our overlapping social circles like wildfire. And when the news reached Natalie, she broke. Not quietly. Not privately. Spectacularly. She came to the wedding. I don't know how she found out the exact date and location. Maybe someone told her out of misplaced loyalty or morbid curiosity. Maybe she saw something on social media despite both of us blocking her. Maybe she'd been monitoring us more carefully than we realized, but she was there. sitting in the very back row of the small chapel we'd rented, wearing sunglasses indoors like she was at a funeral instead of a wedding, trying desperately to be invisible. But she might as well have been wearing neon. Everyone noticed her. The whispers rippled through the small gathering of friends and family like wind through grass. I saw her the moment I walked to the front. My heart stuttered, and for just a second, I was back in that kitchen, hearing her lies, feeling that betrayal all over again. But then I looked at Claire, standing at the entrance in a simple white dress that made her look like something out of a dream, and everything else fell away. "Should we ask her to leave?" Claire whispered when she reached the altar and saw where my eyes had gone. Her hand found mine, squeezed gently, anchoring me. I looked back at Natalie one more time. Her face was pale, even under the makeup she'd carefully applied. Her hands were shaking where they gripped her purse in her lap. Her jaw was clenched like she was physically holding herself together. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not pity. Not vindication. Just distance. Like she was a character in a story I'd finished reading years ago. "No," I said quietly, turning back to Claire, to my future. "Let her stay." Claire's eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "This isn't about her anymore," I said, and I meant it with everything in me. "This is about us. About the life we're choosing. The love we're claiming. She can watch or leave. It doesn't change what we're doing here." The officiant began, his voice warm and steady. The words washed over me: love, commitment, partnership, choosing each other every single day even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And I meant every single word of the vows I'd written. When he asked, "Do you take this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold from this day forward?" I didn't hesitate. "I do." My voice was clear. Strong. Certain. Claire's eyes were shining with tears when she said the same, her voice steady and sure despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I do." And that's when I heard it. A small, choked sound from the back of the chapel. I glanced back and saw Natalie's face crumble. The mask she'd been holding in place shattered, and underneath was something raw and real and devastating. She stood up abruptly, the movement jerky and graceless, knocking her purse to the floor. She tried to leave quietly, tried to slip out the back without causing more of a scene. But everyone turned. Everyone saw. Everyone knew. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow echoed in the small space. For a moment, there was silence. Awkward and heavy. Then Claire squeezed my hand, and the officiant smiled gently, and we continued. When he said, "You may kiss the bride," I pulled Claire close and kissed her like we were the only two people in the world. Like nothing else mattered except this moment, this promise, this choice we were making together. Because in that moment, we were. And nothing else did. The reception was small. Intimate. Full of people who actually loved us, who'd supported us through the worst of it, who understood what this meant. We danced. We laughed. We toasted to new beginnings and second chances and the courage it takes to choose happiness. No one mentioned Natalie. No one needed to. She'd lost me. And she'd lost Claire, the only friend who'd ever really cared about her, who'd loved her despite her flaws, who'd tried to make her see what she was doing before it was too late. Not because we'd set out to hurt her. Not because we'd planned some elaborate revenge. But because of the truth. The simple, unavoidable truth that you can't build happiness on someone else's destruction. That love isn't about possession or performance. That some people will never see you clearly, and that's not a failure on your part, it's a limitation of their vision. When Claire and I left that night, married and deliriously happy, we didn't look back. We only looked forward. We didn't see Natalie again after that. Not in person, anyway. I heard things through the grapevine, the way you always do in overlapping social circles that can never quite fully separate. She moved to another city. Portland, someone said. Or maybe Seattle. Somewhere far enough away to feel like a fresh start. She deleted all her social media accounts, or at least made them so private that no one I knew could find them anymore. She stopped talking about me altogether, stopped telling the stories she'd crafted so carefully. Part of me hoped she found peace. I really did. Not because I owed her anything, but because carrying that much bitterness seemed exhausting. I hoped she learned something from it all. I hoped she figured out how to be happy without making someone else small. But mostly, I stopped thinking about her. I stopped carrying her story the moment I said "I do" to Claire. I put it down like a heavy bag I'd been dragging around for years, and I walked away from it without looking back. Now, Claire and I live in a small house on a quiet street where everyone knows their neighbors' names. It has a garden that Claire tends every morning before work, wearing the same paint-stained jeans and oversized sweatshirt she's always loved. She grows tomatoes and lavender and these little yellow flowers I can never remember the name of no matter how many times she tells me. The garden smells like summer and earth and hope. We have Sunday dinners with friends who see us, not the rumors, not the scandal, not the messy past, just us. Just two people who found each other and chose each other and keep choosing each other. They see the way Claire touches my shoulder when she passes behind my chair. The way I automatically pour her coffee exactly how she likes it. The thousands of tiny intimacies that make up a real life. And at night, when the world is quiet and the house is dark except for the lamp we keep on in the hallway, we lie in bed and talk about everything and nothing. Our days. Our dreams. The funny thing someone said at work. The book she's reading. The project I'm working on. The trip we want to take next summer. The life we're building together, brick by brick, choice by choice. Sometimes, when we're lying there in the comfortable silence that comes from really knowing someone, Claire asks me if I regret how it all happened. No, I tell her every time. I don't. Because the truth is, I didn't marry Claire to hurt Natalie. I didn't propose to prove a point or win some imaginary competition or show anyone what they'd lost. I married her because she was the first person who loved me for who I actually was. Not who she wanted me to be. Not who I could become if I just tried harder or changed myself or performed masculinity in the right way. Not some idealized version she'd constructed in her head. Just me. Quiet, gentle, poetry-loving, museum-going, soft-spoken me. She saw all of that, all the parts Natalie had weaponized, all the characteristics someone else had turned into flaws, and she loved me not in spite of them, but because of them. Because they were part of the whole person she'd fallen in love with. And in the end, that was the only revenge that mattered. Not making Natalie cry at our wedding. Not watching her social life crumble. Not hearing that she'd moved away or deleted her accounts or stopped telling lies about me. But this? This quiet, ordinary, extraordinary life. This morning coffee and evening conversations. This garden that smells like summer. This love that doesn't require me to be anything other than exactly who I am. Being happy. Being loved. Being free. That was always the point. That's always been the point. Some mornings, I wake up before Claire, and I lie there watching her sleep. Watching the way the early light filters through the curtains and paints patterns on her face. Listening to her breathe. Feeling grateful in a way I never knew was possible. And I think about the man I was 3 years ago. The one who was slowly disappearing inside a marriage that required him to be smaller and quieter and less himself with every passing day. The one who believed the lies someone he loved had told about him. The one who thought maybe he really was the problem. I think about how close I came to never leaving. To accepting that version of love, or what I thought was love, as the best I deserved. And I'm so grateful I found the courage to walk away. To believe I deserved better. To bet on myself even when it felt terrifying. Because that decision, that moment of saying, I want a divorce in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and contempt, led me here. To this house. This garden. This woman sleeping beside me who knows every part of me and loves all of it. The beginning isn't always where you think it is. Sometimes it's hidden in what looks like an ending. Sometimes you have to let something die completely before something new can grow. I thought my life was ending when I walked out of that house with one duffel bag and a shattered heart. But it wasn't ending. It was just beginning.